Men, my date booty called another dude in front of me mid-date last night and left. What's the worst date you've experienced? My college crush asked me out on a date and I was so happy. Show up to the restaurant, she arrives, we get a table and start chatting. About 10 minutes in, another dude shows up and sits down with us. I'm super confused, but she introduces him as a friend and I mean, what am I supposed to do? A few minutes later this dude goes to the bathroom, and while he's gone she leans in close to me. Tells me this is the guy she really wants to date, but she's not sure if he's right for her. She wants me to evaluate him because she really values my opinion and wouldn't date a guy I didn't approve of. She didn't exactly make a booty call in front of me, but she asked me on a date to get my approval for the guy she really wanted. Some things stick with you forever. She brought her friends and expected me to pay for everyone. Her friends were cool but the date ended up being a girls' night out on me. Yeah, no thanks. To clarify, I did not pay for anything. My meal and drinks came to 30 of the $300 bill. I tipped the waiter 30 and toilet dashed. Same thing happened to a friend of mine. He said he just enjoyed the conversation, thanked his date for the good times and told her friends that they could treat him to dinner again anytime, then just got up and left before they could protest, or understand what was going on. His phone exploded not 5 minutes after he left. Bill was up to the $300 mark, plus 20% to the waiters. Only about $20 were his, converting from my currency, to US dollars. They were furious. Honestly, I don't know what they expected. Is there really a sucker that would pay for a whole group of people he never agreed to bring along? I was invited on a date by a woman I met on Tinder. She said her friend was in town and they were going to see a live podcast and invited me with. It was a podcast I'd never heard of before and honestly I probably wouldn't be very interested in it if I wasn't invited, but it cost like $25 to get in. I get there and she meets me and we buy a drink and sit down. She introduces me to her friend. They then proceed to talk to each other, not involving me in conversation at all. Then some guy comes along and sits next to her friend. He introduces himself to me, and I thought he was just being friendly. After the podcast, my date and her friend are still talking to each other and ignoring me. This guy who introduced himself to me is kind of following us and he starts having a conversation with me, which is fine because my date wasn't talking to me at all. It turns out this guy was her friend's date, but I had no idea because no one was saying anything to me. The girls then wanted to meet the guy who was doing the podcast, so we waited in line for a while. Of course the girls never said anything to us guys. The girls then started talking to another woman in line and seemed to make a friend. After they got to meet the guy who did the podcast, my date's friend turns to us guys and says, well, we think we're going to have a girls' night out now. So our dates and the woman they met just left to go get drinks or something. The other guy and I just turned to each other and said WTF. We then decided to go to a nearby bar for a beer and have a bro date. He was a decent dude. But the whole situation was just so weird. On 3 separate occasions, with 3 different women, in different states. At the end of the second date, these young ladies apparently had a change of heart on their sexuality and came out to me as being a lesbian. It is for that reason, some of my friends refer to me as Team Changer. We had a lovely time eating and went on to have a cocktail at the River Bar. It is a popular place to have a date. After having a seat she looked around and suddenly acted weird. At some point she stood up and went to a table, arguing with a guy who was with a woman. She made a gesture and I went over. She was telling the guy she moved on and I am her boyfriend now. We haven't kissed before, it was our first date, but she tried to French kiss me and became quite forceful. I pushed her back gently and told her to calm down. She was angry and went on to the bar to chat with a guy I assume she didn't know and went with him to sit at a different table. Still standing next to the other couple, I didn't know how to feel, so we burst out laughing to shake the tension. I wished them a lovely evening and went. I guess this is one of my worst ones. I once went dancing with a date and she went home with someone she met at the club. I went to prom with a girl. She ended up fucking another guy in the hotel room bathroom at the after party. This thread is a massacre. When I was in high school summer after junior year, I went to a house party hosted by some kids in the neighboring town I played travel soccer with. This really cute girl I didn't know overheard me mention that I thinking of going to beach the following day. She immediately started flirting with me the rest of the night and strongly suggested that I take her with me so we can spend the day together. So I picked her up the next day and we get to the beach and lo and behold all her closest guy friends including the guy she clearly really wanted was there. Apparently, she just needed me to get there and didn't bother even introducing me to anyone. I felt like a fucking moron. I stuck it out basically by myself for a few hours while she chilled with them, but I wound up getting the last laugh. They were heading back to one of their houses for a pool party and didn't have room for her, so she comes back asking me if I want to go. I told her sorry, I have plans, got in my car and left her standing there in the parking lot. Her dad apparently had to come pick her up 2 hours later when he got off work. So I met this girl at a bar, we hit it off and talk all night. Got her number and scheduled a date. On the day, she's happy to see me, all seems good. We're walking around the local park and stop by a bench. Then I get blindsided. "So, we're friends, aren't we?" she states, massively emphasizing friends. Uh-oh. She then spews every cliche hint she can think of to indicate she's not interested. "I'd love to hang out again, but I'm really busy. You'd make a great boyfriend to someone someday. I'm talking to this other guy and thinking of fucking him, what do you think?" She actually asked that. It was so embarrassing and condescending. Why not be direct? I'm usually good at judging these situations. There were no signs before this to suggest she wasn't interested. It caught me completely off guard and I just freeze up, deer in the headlights. Whilst she's talking, I spot a football bouncing towards us. It's from the kids playing nearby. It's not going fast, but it's going straight for her head. I should probably stop it. I'm frozen. I can't move. She hasn't noticed. I can't say anything. Am I just going to watch this hit her? Donk. Turns out, yes, she's fine, but she looks at me in disgust. Did you see that coming? Why didn't you tell me? Now, I haven't said anything this whole time. And I continue to do so. I just sit in silence, whilst she keeps asking. I say nothing. It eventually devolves to the two of us just sitting in awkward silence. The date ended shortly after. I never saw her again. It's definitely a memory I cringe at sometimes when I'm trying to sleep. I was being honest and told the girl that I was a virgin. She said, "Sorry, I can't be your first," and got up and left. Girl on a dating app saying she doesn't want guys who are just interested in sex. She asked my sexual experience and when I told her there wasn't much, she just said I'm not a teacher and left the conversation. Figure out what you want. I was once making out with an older girl. In the midst of the action, she said she had to go to the bathroom and never came back. Later on, she messaged me, saying she couldn't stop thinking about her ex whilst making out with me and had to leave so as to call him. Go figure. It was not a date, to me at least. I was invited to dinner and a movie by my physical therapist after completion of long-term treatment after a car accident. I get to her house and a party is in progress. It is our engagement party. She had told her whole family that we had been dating and now we're getting married. They even had a banner with our names on it. I walked out. By the way, I am gay. I had been talking to the new girl at work. She had been over to my apartment once and we had gone running on a second meetup. We also had a movie night that turned into a light makeout session at my apartment. She still lived at home. I invited her over to make her dinner after those first few meetups and she brought her boyfriend. We all had a drink and then I made the excuse that I had to go out, and they had to go. No soup for you. She said she left the last guy cause he drank too much. She proceeded to have 9 beers on each of our 2 dates. I struggled to go through 3. My idea on drinking a lot is now somehow fuzzy. Man, fuck her. I got invited to a concert out of town by a girl in my uni, just me and her, and we had been on 1 date before. The date ended with her disappearing without a word, and after an hour or so I got a message from her brother who said he could drive me home for way too much money, but I kinda had to accept since I was stuck. It was a Tinder date. We went for lunch. She was so boring, gave one-word answers to most questions, etc. Final nail in the coffin was when she asked me what I did for a living, and I told her and explained, I'm a manufacturing engineer working for a large car company. Just after this I went to the toilet. On the way back to my seat I noticed she was midway through googling how much manufacturing engineers make a year. I finished my lunch, then excused myself to the toilet again, but I just walked out and left. Haven't got time for people like that. She was chewing gum when her mixed drink and appetizer came. She spit it into her hand and stuck it under the table. I slapped $50 down, got my pocket knife out and scraped it off the bottom of the table and walked to the men's room and put it in the trash. Walked back to the table and told her to enjoy her night.